Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CVAR. I suppose this will be the last lecture of the year, a lecture by two very good friends of the CVAR and supporters, Johann Pillai and Anber Onar. Just a few words about our speakers before we hear them talk. Johann Pillai read literature at Yale University and did his master's and doctorate in comparative literature at the State University of New York at Buffalo. He has taught at universities in the States, Turkey and Cyprus, where he also co-founded and from 2007 to 2015 was the Language and Education Director of Side Streets, an independent arts, culture, education and social responsibility initiative in Nicosia. An associate professor of comparative literature, he has written on American and European romanticisms, British modernism, and Cypriot and Turkish art. His book, Bedri Rahmi, The Lost Mosaic Wall, from Expo 58 to Cyprus 2010, details his discovery and reconstruction of the famous lost work by the Turkish artist Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. On the other hand, Anber Onar is an independent artist and cultural producer based in Cyprus. Her educational background includes a Bachelor of Fine Arts in the Visual Arts from Rutgers University and a Master's in Critical Analysis from Eastern Mediterranean University. She has taught visual arts at universities in Turkey and Cyprus, and is actively involved in exhibiting her own work as well as in the organization and curation of art events. She's the author of numerous essays on art in Cyprus and of the book Abdullah Onar, A Modern Past in Architecture, published in 2022, chronicling the life and work of the prominent modernist Cypriot architect. In 2007, she co-founded Side Streets, where she was the art director until 2018. Among the exhibitions and events, she has curated in Art Streets the exhibition of Bedri Rahmi, The Lost Mosaic Wall, from Expo 58 to Cyprus. And this is what we're about to hear tonight by our two friends. Can I ask Johann and Amber to join me here? Or rather to take the floor?
Amber will start.
All right.
Okay, I will do the starting. Hi, good evening, and thank you very much for coming here, and thank you, Rita, for inviting us, and CVAR for having us tonight here. I will be talking about how we started this whole project, and in 1958 Expo, Brussels. And the work was 227 meters square, so it's a very large work, which was actually not just an artwork in itself, but it was also incorporated in architecture. And within the architecture, this wall was actually being part of the architecture as joining two buildings together, which was a Turkish pavilion at the time. And the two buildings that were representing the east and west of Turkey, Eastern Turkey, Western Turkey, and traditional and modern Turkey. So this was like an interesting start. Anyway, our involvement in this project starts with a friend of mine, artist friend of mine, Emin Çizemek, one day calling me in 2009 and saying, Amber, the Turkish embassy called me and told me that they have this work of art by Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu, who was a very prominent artist, and they're interested in giving this work to a more public building place so that more people can enjoy it. What do you think? And I said, well, I don't know the work. I wasn't really aware of the work. And I said, so can we go and see it at the embassy? I said, yeah, sure. So we got an appointment. We went to see this work, and this was it. This was in the living room of the waiting room of the embassy. And this was the work. And right next to it was a little text which was explaining what this was. And all it was saying was that this work was done by Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu, which used to do once 227 meters square work, which is like they're all made of panels of mosaic. And each panel is about 50 centimeters and about 220 centimeters high. And now they only have this because after 1958 show at Expo in Brussels, this work was brought to Turkey. But then in 1962 there was an exhibition in Cyprus, and they brought it to Cyprus. And then the people here liked it so much, they said, you can keep it there. So they left it here. Quite a lot of panels were left here. We don't know exactly how many, but this is all we have now. And I said, wow, this is intriguing, because then it says at the end of it, of this text, that there were 200 panels as such, but we don't know whatever happened to the rest of it. So they said, wow, this is really interesting, So why don't we, instead of thinking about taking it to another building and just putting it out there without anybody understanding what this is, let's make a call. As side streets at the time, this was one of the things that we're really interested in doing. We called that, I said, can we propose a project for you to the embassy so that we can make more use of this thing? And then after our project is ended, you can always put this in any building you would like. And they said, okay. So we said, all right, we'll have an exhibition and a call so that people will be aware of what's happening. And if any of these pieces are still in Cyprus, people will bring it to us. And it will be a good thing to kind of complete this fragmented work. And so we did. And we started working on this. This was at the end of 2009. And I said to Johann, come on, let's do it. And he said, let's do it. And he started researching, of course, in order to write a catalogue for it before the exhibition. And the exhibition was to be done in October 2010. So Johann started researching, and he says, oh my God, I can't finish it. This is so intriguing. The more he researched, the more he found about it. So he said, oh my God, there could be more coming out then. And as we were doing this, of course, we were making a lot of people aware of what we were doing. And we were saying, have you seen any mosaic wall anywhere? We were looking for it. And then we found out that actually military also has some. We went and visited those, and we asked them again and again, do you have any more? Do you have any more? They said no. Then we started asking individuals who could have had any kind of connection to these things. Nothing. Then Johann went all the way to Brussels, to the beginning of this work, where this work actually was set up. We went to Turkey, to England, to all over there. He was like a real detective, looking for this, to see whatever happened to the thing. Anyway, he'll be telling me about this very soon. So so I am just introducing Johann, basically, explaining how he has actually gotten to find out whatever happened to this work. And this was a thing that I like to talk about. Oops, I have. All right, Johann.
So, all right. So when I started working on this thing, we had no information at all. I went onto the internet to see, because I thought this is a famous work. It's 100 meters of mosaic. There must be some information about it. But actually, there was practically nothing. There were about 10 or 15 photographs of little pieces of the wall like this. All of the books in Turkey, all of the websites of art historical websites in Turkey said this artist, Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu, had created this huge wall in 1958 for the Brussels World's Fair, and then after the World's Fair, it had disappeared, and they all ended saying, nobody knows what happened to the buildings and nobody knows what happened to the mosaics. Okay? So that was my starting point. What we had hoped was that for the exhibition we could have a catalogue, we could show the whole wall and then show which parts of it were here in the Turkish embassy. But we couldn't. So I started trying to reconstruct the thing. So the first thing was to find out about the original context in which it was offered. And for reasons of time, I've removed a lot of things here about the Brussels World's Fair. But it was held in 1958. And, just let me see. Sorry, let me go back. It was held in 1958, and I'll just talk about this briefly for a minute, in Brussels, because Brussels was going to be the new capital of Europe. And so they redid the roads, they remodeled the entire city, they built the Atomium, this huge creation, which was the sort of symbol of using atomic energy for peace. So all of these things became symbols of the Brussels World's Fair. And they invited different countries to participate. Lots of countries participated, and each country set up a building. They actually constructed a building, a pavilion, where they could show off the culture of their own country. So the largest two were the American and the Russian ones. The American one had fashion shows, Disney World, Coca-Cola, this sort of thing. The Russian one had a big statue of Lenin. They showed the Sputnik, because that had just gone up. So this is the beginning of the Cold War, sort of the space race, if you like, 1958, more specifically. So those two were the big ones that everyone was in competition with. And then you had all the other countries. So one of those was Turkey. So rather than look at the fair itself, I'm going to Turkey, and then I will focus on the part in Cyprus. So in Turkey, there were 4 architects. They were working on a project to build Middle East Technical University in Ankara. And then they heard that there was a competition to build a pavilion for the Brussels World's Fair. And they would get a free trip to Brussels and so on. So they got very excited. They decided not to build the university and instead to work on a pavilion. So they had the competition. This is sort of what they looked like when I met a couple of them. Recently, they're all dead now. And they came up with a plan for a building that would represent Turkey, because you want to represent your country culturally, architecturally, and so on. So the plan you see in the middle there is basically, I don't know, where is the laser pointer? Try that. Does that work? This thing. Yes. Okay. Let me do this the old-fashioned way. This is a car antenna. So the building over here was made of teak wood, and the building over here was made of glass. Okay, so this was the plan. Glass and aluminium. This would be a showcase. This part would be a restaurant on top and a cafeteria below. And joining the two buildings would be this wall. So the wall was put here symbolically to unify the two buildings. And what you see at the top is the actual model that the architects made. This is a later reconstruction by students at Ghent University. So you can see actually the structure of it and the wall running through the middle. So the wall was actually 50 meters with mosaics on both sides, and that's why it's a 100-meter mosaic wall. It is modeled actually on these two buildings in Istanbul, which you can see from one of the architect's houses. This is the Köprülü Yalı, which is an old 19th century building made of teak and it's on stilts. So they kind of echoed that with the structure of the building on stilts. And the other one is Göksu Kasri, it's a sort of old Ottoman palace. And the two of them were laid together by the wall. So the two buildings were supposed to be symbolic. So the teak one represented the old-fashioned buildings, old Turkey, or Istanbul, Constantinople, if you like, the previous capital. And the glass building represented modern Turkey. And so the wall was supposed to connect the ancient and the modern, the old capital with the new capital. Right? So everything about this wall was to do with connection, not with blocking anything or preventing anything from getting in, but it was all to do with connection in some way. And these are actually brochures from 1958, from the pavilion. So they started the construction, and of course, many of these materials, they needed thick plate glass for the glass pavilion. They needed aluminium. Aluminium wasn't even being manufactured professionally in Turkey. It wasn't manufactured for another 3 years. So basically, the materials were contracted to Belgian and French firms, and another French company, a Belgian company, actually did the construction work. But the designs were all put together in Turkey. So while they were doing this, Bedri Rahmi in Istanbul was trying to get his mosaic wall together. So the way this was done, they imported the most expensive blue stones they could get from Italy. And in his apartment and in the garden of his house in Istanbul, they had a rotating team of 12 artists who had these slabs of stone, and they cut them by hand with pliers into tesserae, the little pieces that make up the mosaic. And they were all in different colors and shades, and they had to match the drawings or sketches put together by the artist. Okay, so what you're seeing over here is chipping and cutting the stone. Over here, kind of placing it on the sketches in pattern. Okay, and this is when they've sort of been assembled together. So after they put all the stones together, right, they then put a sort of waxed paper with glue on one side over the top, over the front of the mosaic. Okay? So in fact, for each of the panels, you have about 6 of these rectangles, which make up the panel. And then you pick it up, and it's just a piece of paper with the stones on it. So the entire wall was created on these panels with the mosaics, and then they were shipped in layers of paper like this to Brussels. So once they went to Brussels, they were then set up and set in fiber cement. Right? So actually each panel weighs about 70 kilos when you lift it up, and it's actually cement, and the mosaics are there. So once you lay the mosaics down, you then peel off the wax paper, and you have the image on the front. So that was the technique. And here you have the panels actually being lifted up. So Anber said it's 2.27, that's the actual height of the wall, but they added sort of metal legs underneath it and metal protection on top with lights. So when you add all that, the height of the wall is about 2.6 meters in there. So this is a picture of the artist, Bedri Rahmi, in his studio. And at the back, okay, you can see a sort of sketch here. This is for part of the back of the wall. And this is actually him in Brussels afterwards, in front of the finished wall. On the piece that you see at the back here is a sketch for part of the front of the wall. And here you see him with another visitor in front of the actual wall after it was completed. So, this is what the actual Turkish pavilion looked like in Brussels. On the left, you have the wooden pavilion, on the right, the exhibition pavilion. And this is a 30-foot tall pylon built by a Turkish artist, Johann Pillai. It was put there as a kind of landmark, but actually next to it is the pavilion of Monaco. So you have this M from the pavilion behind it. Okay, that's what you kind of see in all the photographs. And you can actually see the wall, bits of it connecting through here. So, the pavilion itself, and these are just different images of it, it kept changing. They didn't know, should we put the name Turkey on the bottom, on the top? So in each photograph, it sort of every couple of weeks, they changed it around, and the pictures of the pavilion look quite different. So this is in a different season with no markings on it. Okay. This is the pavilion at night, and you can see the wall was entirely lit up as it goes through the pavilion. So the effect of the architecture was to create sort of these layers of transparency with the wall kind of visible from all sides. And this is another sort of image of it, generally speaking. Across from it was the British pavilion. A little bit further down was the Spanish pavilion, and so on. So that's all sort of incidental details of the fair. I'll take you on a very quick tour of the pavilion. The one on the left here, this is the wooden one, this is the glass one. But this is a very quick tour before I get to the actual wall. This pavilion was a big deal. It was the first modern prefabricated building produced in Turkey. So every part of it was numbered. The plan was after the fair in Brussels, which lasted for 6 months, it would go back to Turkey in pieces and they would reinstall it and make it a sort of art gallery exhibition space in Turkey. Okay, so it was all set up to do that. And around it, basically, were all kinds of cultural things. And I should add, the Brussels World's Fair was huge. 46 million people attended in 1958. The entire population of Belgium, everyone from Sophia Loren to Brigitte Bardot to Orson Welles. It was just a huge phenomenon. And so each country was under pressure to produce something that would compete with everything else. The Russians, for example, had the Bolshoi Ballet there. So what did the Turks have? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. So this is when you enter the pavilion. What you're seeing here, and I'll do this very quickly, on the left you see the red arrow. They had 4 hostesses who would guide people around the pavilion, and they all spoke 5 or 6 different languages. They were highly educated. And they sat there with the brochures. Here they are sitting in front of another part of the wall. That's Bedri Rahmi, the artist, down at the bottom, with friends sitting on yet another part of the wall. And as you can see, here's the wall, and there are all these exhibition cases. These had different objects in them. For example, let me go back a second. Bookbinding, examples of texts from the Ottoman period, that sort of thing. And on the other side, there were examples of clothing, imitation clothing from different periods of Turkey, produced by various women's institutes in Turkey. And as you walked in, okay, you can see the clothing sections over here. You can see part of the wall here, the exhibition cases continue, and you walk around the wall and come around to the back. So that's a photo mural, by the way, it's not actually 3-dimensional at the back, the Ataturk image. So if you continue, this is going around the back of the wall, okay? The back had things from the Topkapı Palace that were sent there with the security team and so on. So when you come out from the back, this is what you see. This is part of the back of the wall. Across from this was the British pavilion. And what you see here is not part of the pavilion. It's part of a boat that was floating in the water in front of the British pavilion, opposite it. So let me move ahead. There was behind the wall a little shop that sold Turkish delight and things like that, sort of local Turkish produce, cigarettes. This is taken from behind that little stall. And the idea was that people would go through Turkey in this pavilion, and when they came out, they would be, where would they be? They would be in Europe. Interestingly, the street that the pavilion was on was called the Avenue of Europe. Okay, so when they came out, all along on the side here, there were carnations and flowers and so on to show Turkey's connection with Europe. So this is, you can see part of the flowers kind of on the left there. So you come out of the main pavilion and then you go into the wooden pavilion. The downstairs was the Café Turk, so they sold Turkish coffee and things like that. Upstairs was actually a full-scale restaurant. The people who ran these cafes and restaurants were from the most famous restaurants and cafes in Ankara, in Turkey. They brought teams of waiters and all that from there. So we've now come to the front of the wooden pavilion. Okay. And I just want to show you a couple of things. This is upstairs in the restaurant. The curtains were also silk screened by Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu. So every part of this thing was a work of art. And if you look downstairs in the cafe, this is one picture from the cafe. It's a close-up. And it gives you an example of what Turkey put into this. At the back here, you can see part of the Mosaic Wall by Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu. The table was made by another artist, Namık Bey. The coffee cups were made by another artist, Pillai Anber, and people loved them so much that every week they sold them all, the visitors to the fair, and they kept ordering new sets. So I haven't been able to find any of the real cups. They're probably in flea markets around Belgium right now. And I would need to go there and wander around for a few weeks and find them. But I know what some of them look like, at least from here. The chairs were designed by another artist, Johann Pillai, and the people sitting here, Johann Pillai was the director of the pavilion. He was one of the most famous artists in Turkey. There's a whole section of the Istanbul Modern Museum dedicated to him. In the middle, you have Linda Power, who's an actress and the wife of the actor Tyrone Power, and on the right, a reporter from a newspaper in Turkey. So this is an example of kind of the scene at the Turkish pavilion. They had an opera with Leyla Gencer, who usually substituted for Maria Callas when she was ill and so on. So she was the other great opera singer of the time. They had symphony concerts with modern Turkish music from all of the virtuoso pianists and composers in Turkey at the time. And they had a fashion show put together by models and professors from different fashion institutes in Turkey. And these are just examples of some of the fashions from the period. Okay, so they also brought 20 folk dancing teams to Brussels. This is the Ottoman marching band walking in front of the pavilion. And these are some of the folk dancing teams. Okay. This is the Ottoman marching band and the atomium. Right. There was a football game, Belgium versus Turkey, and there was also an art exhibition of 50 years of modern art, which included 3 Turkish artists. Okay. So you have to think of the context of this wall as a general cultural promotion, if you like, of what was modern about Turkey or what they considered Western or European. So let me get to the actual wall. And I'm just going to go through it step by step so you can see. And then after that, we will come to the issue of Cyprus. The first thing to bear in mind is that the wall is generally in blue tones. This is because of something called blue Anatolia. Okay. The idea was that these are the people who started the Blue Voyage and so on. The idea was that you would find simplicity in the sea and in the villages around the Aegean and so on. And so they were promoting a kind of naturalistic, sort of return to nature, simplicity, right? At the same time, they wanted to connect this with village schools and bringing people together, not on the level of cities, but on a sort of popular social level. So here's the artist. This shows you the scale. The artist and his wife, Eren Eyüboğlu, with one of the architects. And now we get to the actual wall. In front of the wooden building, and what you'll notice is this is in bits and pieces in black and white and color. And that's because I've been able to reconstruct, out of the 200 panels of this wall, about 190 of them. But the reconstruction is based on the photographs I could find. Some are black and white, some are in color, some are fragments of actual panels, which I managed to fit onto the photograph. Okay, so this is the most complete view of the wall that you'll see. So the first thing you have is these four girls wearing Turkmen skirts, carrying different kinds of food with them. Okay. Just as a little note, when this mosaic wall was coming, there was a lot of criticism of it in Turkey because they were against the idea of artists using mosaic. They said, this is a Greek thing and this is an Orthodox thing. Right? And the artists are sort of argued back and said, well, the Romans had it, it was there in the business, it's part of our Turkish culture as well, it's there in the Hagia Sophia and all of these places. And the artist himself said, I like working with mosaic because it reflects the light in different ways, in a way that other media don't. Okay, so that's just a little footnote. So in front of the restaurant, appropriately, you have all these dishes of food. As you move a little bit further, you have these images here, and what you have in each of them is basically three figures of girls. There are three heads here, basically, and they're holding up trays with different kinds of food and what they call water jugs, traditional Ottoman water jugs. So these are four of those. And then there's an image of the tree of life. You can see here that there are two doors. These doors go into behind the cafe, into the toilet area and the kitchen and so on. So these are the service doors. That's the tree of life. And then after that, in the front, you have these four images, which are again three figures in each one. In this case, there's only a little bit of this. Here you can see a train. Okay, there's a sort of ship here, an image of a ship. There's a train, blue train going around here. There's another ship, a steamship of some sort, and here just their hands reaching around and holding each other. So if you go a little bit further, these are apparently what might be sketches or something similar that somebody sent me from Izmir, but we couldn't track them down. But you can see again, here's one with the train and the ships. And this is similar to the image of the end. Okay, when you go past this building, the next thing you're going to see is the main image on the mosaic. Okay, this is the showpiece as you walk into the pavilion. What are you actually seeing here? Well, this is the first section up to here, which you're seeing here. And this is quite extraordinary. Here's the artist's name, Bedri Rahmi. At the bottom here, you have a row of dancers. These are the heads, the torsos, and the bodies. The legs, rather. Okay. These two things represent the shores of the Bosphorus. Okay. And if you look at a map of Turkey, these are the two sides of the Bosphorus. So actually, this is showing you a stylized map of Turkey. This is the water with all the different fish in it, sailboats. These are the triangular things are shadırvan, which are the little houses you have outside mosques where you go and wash your hands before you go into the mosque. And this is the Maiden's Tower, or the little lighthouse that is in the water off the coast of Istanbul. Then there's the setting sun. From mythology, there are four versions of Karagöz's boat, from one of the Karagöz stories. And then we get to the other side of Istanbul. And that side, you can see three different mosques, the blue mosques, the Selimiye, and so on, because you can count the minarets, and according to that, these are the three main mosques on this side of Istanbul. You will see various other images in there, which can all be mapped onto Istanbul. And a little bit further down, you see the same three mosques appearing again. In between them, you have what they call gerdanlılar. These are the sort of beads that women in Anatolia wear when they're getting married. Down here, for example, is a structure with 18 domes on it. The only structure with 18 domes in Istanbul is the covered market, the Kapalı Çarşı. Okay. So there are other buildings here that are Mimar Sinan University, which is where the artist was teaching, and so on. Then you go into the pavilion, and then you have this array of images. The first one that you see here, if I cover up the top, you can see it's a row of dancers, and they're inverted on top. dancing a horon. This is a saz player, Karacaoğlan, for example. And this is a horon dance, where all the people are moving their legs together and the arms are coming around on the two sides. If we go a step further, we have this array of figures. The first one, pretty good look at this one. Okay, it's a mother and child, basically. Then you have a shepherd leaning his head on his staff, which is white, who's also holding a child. And then there's a sort of mirror image of two mothers with children. And in the center, Kurban, a shepherd carrying a ram on his shoulders for the sacrifice. This one, you can see how complicated it was reassembling this, is a villager, and he's holding a donkey. That's the head of the donkey, that's the neck, and the body of it is wrapped around it. If you step a little bit further, there's another horon dance. And this image here is a fiddle player. He's playing a sort of a lute or a fiddle. And it's also at the same time an image of a fish. So many of the images here just represent the culture of Anatolia and the villages of that period. Now, the reason I'm able to reconstruct this is because people posed in front of these things, and there are some pictures and you can work them out. Unfortunately, nobody posed behind the wall. Okay, but here and there, by accident, we have a few images. So the white parts are where I don't know exactly what was there, but you can see fragments we have that don't fit anywhere else. So I put them tentatively there. This is a black and white picture showing a swift Ebadir Kushu, and you can see fragments of it are still in place. If you go past that, you can see there's another one in slightly better shape. Okay. In the middle, I have no idea. What you're seeing in that white part is what's on the other side of the wall. Okay. So if we go through here, we can see some abstract shapes, and these seem to be abstractions of people. They could be minarets, but they look like people. And there's a series of these. There's 4 of these here. And when you go outside, in between the two buildings, you have this. Now, each of these images is made of people strung together, hands holding onto legs. I don't know if that's visible. Yeah. So, just for the purpose of identifying them, these look like shuttles that you use for weaving. Okay. This one looks like a twist of wool or thread. And then you have 3 images like this. This is the first one. And you have another one in the center. You can see that the 2 on the sides are the same image which has been rotated. So when I asked around, nobody knew what this was. But I went to Istanbul and I just asked a few people on the streets, does this look familiar? And the people I asked immediately said, yes, this is the Sea of Marmara, and those are the 4 largest Princess Islands. Okay, so I think the key to understanding this is you just walk around and you ask fishermen what fish is that and so on, and they will actually recognize it because it was all designed based on the common people and their understanding. So this, of course, is behind that original map of Istanbul that I showed you. So if you continue past that, you now have what looks like a single strand of thread and 2 more shuttles. And then if we get into the actual cafeteria area underneath, behind the cafeteria, we only have these 2 images. Okay? So the first one is a kind of inverted version of the sort of abstract figures we saw inside the previous pavilion. And the other one you might recognize from the first slide that Amber showed you in the Turkish embassy. Okay. So this is actually another horon dance. These are the heads, the bodies, and the legs of the dancers, and their hands are joined under the belt. Okay. So this is in between the 2 doors, and after that, we just have a big blank. And I've tried for ages to find out what went there. And then, just by accident, a letter turned up from the architects, written to the artist, saying, we want 52 of the panels to be just blue. Plain blue with no images, because that area is where the toilets and so on are, and nobody's going to look at them. Right? So I'm assuming those are blue, and we have some blue panels that don't fit anywhere else. So approximately a quarter of the panels would have been just plain blue mosaic panels. All right, so that's the wall. Okay, after the fair, what happens? It's the end of 1958, the Brussels World's Fair is finished, this thing is supposed to be shipped back to Turkey. So they put it in 50 numbered boxes. Okay. Before they do that, though, there's a bit of a problem because everybody loves this wall in Brussels. The NATO Secretary General says, can we have the wall in front of the NATO building in Paris? The Dutch government wants to buy it and take it to Holland. So the Turkish administration says, no, we're taking this back to Turkey, but we'll get the artist to make another mosaic for you. So he created another 75-meter mosaic, and that went in front of the NATO building in Paris. Okay. Later on, that mosaic was moved with the NATO building when it moved to Brussels as well. So, as far as we know, the rest of the pavilion was all shipped up, packed up, and sent back to Turkey. So it was supposed to go to Ankara, and it went along on the Orient Express. And the idea was it would go to Ankara, but somewhere along the line, for some reason, a message came from the Prime Minister's office saying, send it to Istanbul. So it went to Istanbul instead. And the train came all the way down to a train station called Sirkeci. And when it arrived in Sirkeci, by the way, when did it arrive in Turkey? It took 2 years to get there from Brussels. And the reason was that after the fair, the Turkish government was sort of broke and they hadn't paid the contractors in Brussels for building the pavilion. So it got stuck there until they found the money, and finally 2 years later, they had the money and it went to Turkey. So in 1960, it arrives in Sirkeci. It's just about, okay, when it arrives there, they have already cleared this area down here, they removed some old buildings, and they're going to take the pavilion from there and set it up again here as an exhibition space. But as they're coming through customs, 1960, May, there's a military coup in Turkey. All right, the guy you see in the picture, Cemal Gürsel, becomes the new military ruler of Turkey. And what they do is they replace everyone working in the train station and the municipality. They fire them all, and they replace them with soldiers, right? Who don't know anything about running a municipality or a train station. So when the soldiers take over, okay, this is from the coup. I mentioned the coup here for another reason, because the coup was against the Prime Minister, Menderes, at the time. And Menderes was one of those who was involved in signing the Cyprus agreements and so on later on. But of course, a year later, Menderes and his two close friends are hanged on the island of Yasada, okay, by the military government. So there are all kinds of other connections here that I'm not delving into yet. But the soldiers find these 50 huge boxes of pieces of the pavilion. So what was in there? The actual building, the mosaics, plus all the artworks. Tables, vases, everything that they had brought from Turkey. And they looked at it and said, oh, we don't need all this rubbish. And they took the 50 boxes and they dumped them all in a park called Gülhane Park next to the train station. So you might want to hazard a guess, how long did they stay in Gülhane Park? Actually 19 years, okay, just sitting out in the rain. So in 1960, the architects found them, the three architects who had designed the original panel. They wrote a letter to the government saying, we found this, some of the pieces are broken, we can fix them, it's a beautiful pavilion, let's rebuild it. But the military government was not interested, so nobody paid any attention. The next time you hear about it is 1963. A newspaper reporter says, like, all this stuff is rotting, the panels by Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu are being destroyed in the weather conditions in the park, and so on. And the newspaper reporter also notes that during this time, everyone passing through the park is helping themselves to bits of the Turkish pavilion, including the police and members of the government, right, who are taking tables and vases and putting them in their offices and their homes and so on. So the pavilion is sort of looted from the park in different ways. So the next time you hear about it, okay, before I get there, do you remember the curtains, the silkscreen curtains upstairs in the cafeteria? So what happened to them? They were also looted from the park, but actually the family of Bedri Rahmi happened to be visiting one of the government ministers, and they found the curtains were hanging in his living room, right? So they kind of demanded them and got them back. But then in 1971, in their house, there was a fire, and because they were silk curtains, they all melted, and the only two pieces left are these two. Okay, the last two fragments left. But I think there are some others around, because I was watching some old Turkish films from the early 70s, and in the background, you can see in the film sets, they're using bits of these curtains, right? So we don't know who picked them up or how they got there, but this is another option for what happened to them. So these are just stills from two of these films. Okay, so the next time we hear about the stuff in the park is 1979. The mayor of Istanbul, Aytekin on the left there, has an advisor called Attila Alpergen. And he says, well, you know, you're my arts advisor, find out what's happening with the arts and so on. And we've heard that there is a piece of art in this park. Can you go and check it out? So Attila goes there, and first he starts investigating. He's asking everybody, I'm looking for some pieces of mosaic because they were in this park. There was a pavilion, there were all these vases and all the rest of it. So he starts with the municipality, and he goes to the director's office, the mayor's office, and he says, I'm looking for this pavilion that was in the park. And the mayor bangs his fist on the desk and says, you see this glass table I'm sitting at? That was part of that pavilion. Okay? So, in fact, in the municipality, lots of these artworks were displayed. I tried to go there a few years ago, but of course it's all high security now since this new government came in, so I can't go in. But I know in which corridors all these pieces were. And I talked to some of the people who worked there, the gardeners and drivers and so on, who remember them. Right? So they were actually there. So while he's looking around, Attila suddenly gets a telephone call from the other side of Istanbul, on the far side, Edirne. And somebody says, you were looking for some mosaics, we think we found them. Okay? So he goes there with the mayor and Attila, and the woman is a newspaper reporter called Zeynep Oral. So they drive to that part of Istanbul, and they come up with this newspaper flash article. What they find is there's a little shed there belonging to the director of garages, and you see a sort of red thing here. This was a huge parking lot where they used to wash the garbage trucks. And so what they had lined the floor with was mosaic panels from the Turkish pavilion. You can see some of them here with sandbags piled on top of them, and this is when they were digging them up. So of course, the mayor was very embarrassed by this, and they immediately collected all these panels, and they said, let's send them back to the artist's family. So if you go to the artist's family, that's the house that Bedri Rahmi lived in Istanbul, you will find the panels are still in the garden. Okay? So this is only, what, about 19 panels out of 200. So what happened to the rest of the panels? Well, incidentally, I went back to that place to see if there were any more. And there was just a Doberman guarding this big shed. And I asked, why can't I go in there? And they said, because that belongs to the election board of Turkey. And the Doberman there is to guard the election results. So to understand what happened to the rest of the panels, we have to go back to 1960. Because at this time, while all this is happening in Turkey, something else is happening in Cyprus. Okay? So in Cyprus, as you know, in the 50s, we had all these troubles. And then eventually, after all the protests and yelling and whatever, by 1959 and 1960, we have the Zurich and London agreements. Okay, you're all familiar with this, so I'm zipping through it, of course. Of course, 16th of August, 1960. So the Republic of Cyprus is declared, they have an agreement, and there are the two British bases and so on. Everything is put in place. The Cyprus flag is raised over the government building. The British, Sir Hugh Foote, leaves the island. And then what happens? They bring in 950 soldiers from Greece and 650 from Turkey, and they set up a tripartite camp to train the new army of the Republic of Cyprus. And this happens in an area it's today called Alaiköy. It's, if you go towards Ganyeli from the main roundabout, it's kind of up there on the left. It's where the old British military cemetery and all that used to be. So they set up a camp there to train the new Cypriot army. The commander-in-chief of that, by the way, is Turgut Sunal. He's a colonel at the time. Later he becomes a general in Turkey. The first Turkish ambassador in Cyprus was Emin Dirvana. And this is what the camp looked like at the time. And just within a couple of weeks, a gentleman called Nikos Patikis says, right, this is a few months earlier, he said a new republic is starting in March of 1960. We would like to have an international trade fair in Cyprus, because now we'll be a new country. And this was going to be the 7th international fair. And so through the internet, I tracked down this gentleman on the right, Edip Yener. He was Turkey's trade representative in Barcelona at the time. And he's also dead now. And he was called up one day and said, the Turkish government called him and said, they're going to have a trade fair in Cyprus. It's an international fair. You have to build a pavilion in 2 weeks. Right? And with all these companies exhibiting in it. And Edip said, well, that's absolutely impossible. Okay? Just a little footnote about Edip. You can see him here. A very interesting character. He's got 3 things in front of him. The first thing is this sort of rosary. Right? I asked him, what's that doing there? And he said, these are my 3 most valuable possessions in the world. The rosary, because his wife died. And after his wife died, a bird brought this through the window and dropped it on the pillow of his wife. So that was one. The second thing was that when he came to Cyprus, Macarius gave him as a present a cigarette lighter. And the third was the little yellow ball you see there, because when he was posted to Greece, Papandreou gave it to him and said, as you get older, your fingers will need to exercise, so you should exercise with it. Okay. So these were the 3 things he's been holding on to his entire life. Anyway, let me move on from Edip. So he had to build a pavilion in Cyprus. So he knew a businessman on the far side of Istanbul, okay, because this is where Johann Park was. Mecidiyeköy is a sort of business district right now. So he called up the businessman and said, I have to build a pavilion in 2 weeks. Can you help me? And the businessman said, well, actually, I can. I happen to have a pavilion in my basement, all in boxes, and it's got decorations and mosaics and everything, right? So Edip said, well, that's great. So that's the other person who looted the stuff from the park, okay? So they have to look at it, everything looks fine. and they ship all this stuff to Cyprus. They send the decorator, edit, the trade representative, and so on, and they come to Cyprus. Okay? So, the first Cyprus fair is going to be held in the moat. Now it's where the Zaha Hadid thing is. Yes, where it's been reconstructed. So the fair was going to be held right there, in between the, sort of next to the Costanza bastion. And the previous Cyprus fairs, they had had local businesses, a little bit of Greece, a little bit of Turkey, and so on. But this fair was unique because they had three official pavilions, Greece, Turkey, and Italy. And you can see in each of these pavilions, 90, 111, 120 companies respectively came to display there. Whereas there was also a little information pavilion with Italy, and they had some Vespa scooters outside, and there were about 50 Cypriot businesses and companies. So if you have a look at, this is before Zaha Hadid, that was a parking lot where the main part of the fair was. Above it, there's the Petrolina gas station. I don't know if any of you can recall this setting. So, in 1960, it looked like this. There was a big arch which said, "Welcome to the fair." And the representatives, in the top right, you have Patikis. On the bottom left, you have the Turkish representative, the Greek representative, and the Italian, and so on. Everybody spoke. And Makarios at the bottom. And the fair was brilliantly organized. There was a Greek singer, Miss Evelina, who apparently entertained people, and the Greek military band Eldik, which performed at different points during the fair. And you can see the restaurant and bar were open for different receptions and things in the fair. And so as you walked into the fair, over here you can see the flag of Israel. Okay, and this is the Italian pavilion on the side. As you continued in, you would have the Greek pavilion and then the Turkish pavilion. So, each of these pavilions had stuff outside and inside. So, the Greek pavilion had, Greek fashion, olives, canned products, whatever they brought from Greece. The Israelis had irrigation equipment, air conditioning. They were very excited about that. They had these balloons outside that changed color electrically, which was also deeply exciting in 1960. And then, of course, there were all the Cypriot exhibitors. Okay, so you see in the center Lanitis and Severis and so on. Poulias perfumes on the right at the bottom. You also had a big keen orange juice stand. Yeah. Yeah, Cyprus Airways, Cyprus Tourism. Yeah, bottom left is a cigarette manufacturer, Taki Pataki. Right. So all of these people set up their little stands, and lots of people showed up. And I'm particularly interested in the cars. And yes, so we have the soda car and also the rubber tires. You see the Petrolina petrol station, mobile, and Semperit rubber tires. The Semperit tires are particularly interesting because if you blow up the picture a little bit larger, what you see in the background is the dancers from the Mosaic Wall. Right? So, what did the Turkish pavilion actually look like in Cyprus? Well, you can see this is part of the construction, and it was right on this corner that you see on the left there, below the moat. And this essentially was what it looked like. You can see the tree of life from the pavilion, the two birds that I showed you earlier. And if I go along the side of it, yeah, you can see two of the Horon dances, the figures from the middle. And this is the other side. Okay. And now the brochure for the fair says that there were mosaics inside as well, but I have no photographs of the inside. So I don't know what other panels were actually there. And so the fair finishes at the end of 1960, and after the fair, the Turkish ambassador, Emin Dirvana, says, everybody loves these mosaics. And this wall would be really good for peace in Cyprus. And Edip says, why peace in Cyprus? And he says, because the Greeks and the Turks both see something they can relate to in the wall. For example, the mother and child, the Greek Cypriots see that as kind of the Madonna and Christ. So all of these images have cross-cultural value. And so Edip calls up his businessman friend in Turkey and says the Turkish government would like to buy this pavilion. And the businessman, who basically obviously was feeling guilty, said, well, I'd be glad to get rid of it. It's a present to the Turkish embassy. Okay, it can stay in Cyprus. So it's actually given to the Turkish embassy, not to the military, as the military thought. So it was given to the Turkish embassy, and then what happened after the fair? Well, they got a note from the municipality that they had to remove the pavilion. So they packed up the pavilion and they stored it somewhere. The ambassador liked some of the pieces, so he took them to his home in Kyrenia, which is called Villa Furtina. It's past Çatalca in that direction. And the commander of the Turkish forces said, I have an idea. I would like to have these panels. Why? Because in the tripartite camp, I'm building an officers' club. And I think these mosaics would be really nice decoration. So the ambassador says, okay. And so this is the area that you go into there. It was called Sunalp Gate at one point. And inside, they found this sort of nondescript building, and they got two architects, okay, Behatin and Hıfzı, these are famous Turkish Cypriot architects at the time, and they said, can you remodel this building? So they did. Okay, and the mosaics now appear in front of an army club, okay, in the tripartite camp. Okay, so this is a close-up, and now I think you can recognize the images that you're seeing. This is when you go into the club. Okay, once you go in, you have parts of Istanbul. Okay, there's the general and various friends of his. Okay, inside, you don't see much from this angle, but there's also a jazz stand and a dance floor, with Horon dancers behind it. Okay. In the cafeteria section, okay, so these are more of the Horons. In the cafeteria section, what you see over there on the left are the women carrying the food from the restaurant in Brussels. Okay, so eventually they had a big opening for this, and they invited everybody to come. So it's possible there are still people around who remember going to this. They had a cocktail party, and all of these people showed up there. And I need to find people who can recognize people in these photos. That's all right. So what happens? Well, in 1963, of course, the fighting starts. And when the sort of fighting starts and everyone's running away, they decide to move all these things to a place called the Dolphin. It was a sort of Armenian club at one point. It's in Ortaköy, now in the north. Okay, just as you come out, going towards Nicosia, it's on the left. There's a couple of petrol stations, and there's an army camp right on the left. Okay, so this was the Dolphin, and they decided that they would move the military headquarters there because it was safer than where they were. But when they went there, the walls of the nightclub were kind of too thin. And they said, well, if the Greeks are bombing or, firing at us, the walls won't hold. We need to reinforce them. They said, what can we reinforce them with? Well, we have these slabs of cement, which have mosaics on them. Right? So what they did was they reinforced the entire interior of the Dolphin with mosaic panels by the artist. So, of course, during the fighting, lots of them got bombed, destroyed, etc. So parts of them disappeared there. Okay. Subsequently, in 1974, when the war happened, the Turks came here. they had these trenches which they had to dig. And they needed to support the trenches so the earth wouldn't fall in. And they found these slabs were very good for that as well. So throughout Ganyali, they used whatever mosaic panels were left to support the trenches. So I told you it's the story of an artwork. Okay, so as you can see, art has many functions in Cyprus. I'm sure that at different parts of Ganyali, these panels are still underground, buried wherever those trenches were. What happened after 1974? Well, they had some of these panels left in this place, in the tripartite camp in Alaika. So what they did was they dismantled them all, okay, took them away. Okay, this was a ceramic artist who was visiting with the military at the time. And you can see they pulled out all of these panels. Where did they take them? Nobody knows. Okay, so I went through every soldier's Facebook page in North Cyprus until I found this birthday party, right? And um, if you look closely at it, you will find that in 1975 to 79, okay, that's where it is right now, it was in their dining hall. Okay, so some of the best pieces of this, Sumato Istanbul and so on, are actually in there, and you can actually see one of the mothers and child, the shores of the Bosphorus, and so on in there. So anyway, after I did this project, the army got very excited. They said, oh wow, we have a very valuable piece of art. So they created lights around it and all sorts of things, and that's what it looks like now. Okay, but they wouldn't let us take it, of course, for the exhibition that we had at the end. So the next part of my story, and I'm coming almost to the end here, is a story of ambassadors and their wives. Right. So in 1980, Inal Batu was the Turkish ambassador in the north, and his wife, Nevra Batu, was going around in the gardens of Villa Furtuna, and they found some mosaic panels in the garden shed. So she said, these look very pretty, let's put them up somewhere. So some of them were broken, the ones that were broken, they threw them away. Okay, so this is Villa Furtuna. When you go into it, it's a rather dramatic place. Right, so you walk in and there's this very nice building at the end, and around the corner you have this. So the panels that were in good shape, they decided to put up there. Okay? If you go there, the panels are not there, but you can still see the outline of where they were originally on the wall, because they were there for a while. When they put them up, though, they didn't put them up very firmly. So what happened was, after the referendum, the winds were very strong in Cyprus, and the middle panel fell down and broke. So they threw it away, and they put the remaining panels back in the shed. So then we get to 1996, there's a new ambassador, Ertuğrul Akakan, and his wife is looking around and finds these remaining panels. So she says, well, let's put them back there. Okay, so they put them back there, now a bit smaller. Okay, and then they stay there for a while, but then a new ambassador comes, Aydan Karahan, and his wife, Hale Karahan, sees these panels and says, well, they're very nice, but our house, Villa Furtuna, is very private. Let's take them to Nicosia, put them in our house there, more people can see them, it's a famous artist, etc. So they take them to the Turkish embassy in Nicosia, in the north, and they're going to put it in their house, but the house is undergoing repairs. So next to it, the one on the left, is actually the Turkish embassy, where people go for visas and so on. So they decided to install it in there. On the right-hand side, around here, is a little waiting room. And they decide to install what's left of this in the waiting room. Now, you do recall, of course, this from the cafeteria in Brussels. So they get the gardeners, and I interviewed the gardeners at the Turkish embassy, Okay, so they get the gardeners to hang this up. And when they are hanging them up, the Turkish ambassador comes in and says, "You've got this all wrong." And the gardeners say, "Well, we put it up." And they say, "Well, no." The ambassador says, "Look, that's a fish. Fish don't swim up, fish swim down. Okay, these are sailboats, and you've got them upside down." So they then displayed this in the Turkish embassy upside down, okay, until I informed them about it when we had our exhibition in 2010. Okay. So obviously, it should be the other way around as a horon dance. Okay. So that brings it to the end. We then had another Turkish ambassador, Kaya Turkmen, who was a sort of very interesting guy. And actually, his father had been the diplomat in charge of the Turkish pavilion in Brussels. So when we approached him, he was very excited. He said, "My father used to keep saying, 'Oh, I remember that beautiful wall, nobody knows what happened to it,' and all the rest of it." And so he got very excited by this project. And I said to him, "We heard rumors that we know, for example, that the army used some of these panels. They made counters in their kitchens out of them. They cut them up. They made them into tables." I said, "Do you have anything like that in your house?" And he said, "Actually, in Villa Fortuna, I have a table which is made of mosaic, and I put my feet up on it every evening when I'm drinking my whiskey." So I said, "Can I have that table?" Okay. And that was one of the tables that the army had actually made. Okay. So we know there's more of it around in bits and pieces, but we don't exactly know where to look. So that brings me to the end. So that's as far as I got in 2010. And then we decided we had to have the exhibition. So by this time, as I was discovering each thing, I was writing them down, taking photographs and so on. And we had to produce a book by the time of the exhibition. So the book, it was supposed to be a 5-page little catalogue, but it just grew and grew and grew as all this information came up. So it actually turned into a sort of book. And by now, of course, I have thousands of photographs and objects and all sorts of things. So hopefully another version of that will come out. But I will leave Amber to tell you about the exhibition.
Okay. So 2010, we're doing the exhibition now, and Emin Çizen and I are curating the exhibition together, and we basically had this constructed wall that Johann has discovered. He constructed really from nothing, and we had the 4 pieces of the that we would get from the embassy, and all the archival photographs that Johann also discovered. So we had to put this together. So we constructed the wall to the scale and all that. But just before we started doing our project, setting up the exhibition, suddenly a source brought a truck in front of Science Streets and brought down 46 pieces of this wall to us. 46 fragments of the wall. And this is what they were. And we're like, uh-oh, what do we do now? Because we have only 1 week to go. And we thought about this. We said, what is the meaning of this? How can we put this? There's no point of displaying this on the walls. What can we do? And we thought this was really actually maybe more interesting because this is telling a story, actually. And we designed something. And what we started doing was we had three parts into our exhibition. And in the first room, we put the 4 panels and scaled the whole constructed wall. Then we had the archival material photograph. And this is side space, and this is how we started the four panels you can see. and then this is the constructed wall, which we made smaller than we expected because the back room was going to be full of the other things. And then this is the middle part. And we had lots of visitors, of course. The exhibition was very popular. And then at the back, we decided to do the fragments. We turned this fragment into a monument. We thought that it would be a much more interesting thing to actually do the monument for fragmentation rather than redesigning a whole wall again. And the exhibition it looked like a tomb actually. And the way we set up the whole thing was we had actually the sandbags from the army as well, and we took them and we put them underneath and we set the whole thing up with the sandbags, thinking that this would tell more of a story and bury them rather than display them, and do a whole monument for this. And this exhibition was very, very popular, and the book was very popular. So we actually got to do a lot of seminars, special seminars for different groups, including like the international community from Cyprus, all the diplomats from different countries actually asked for a special seminar, and they came and they watched the exhibition. As well as the cultural minister of Turkey actually came for a visit to Cyprus and came and visited our exhibition and was very impressed by this. So we got a lot of press actually through this, hoping that we would get more and more of these things or something that would happen to this work at the end. But nothing did happen at the end. Nothing did happen, meaning nothing more happened to this work. So what we ended up doing was we ended up giving all these pieces to the embassy actually, and made sure that they inventoried them so that it will be kept there. But the funny thing is that the exhibition finished, but search did not, and we continued on with searching, and people kept telling us different things about where we might find more of these. So they pointed this lady to us in Ganyeli. So we went to her and we said, we heard that you may actually have something that looks like this. It's oh yeah, not me, but my in-laws. He found this one day when he was walking around in Ganyeli after 74 sometime, around the 20s where the army was at one point. He found this blue thing, and he wanted to keep it. So he took it, and he kept it in his garage for years to come. And then as he was getting older, he kept telling his children that one day when I die or your mother dies, I want one piece, there were two pieces, one piece to be on my tombstone and the other one for your mother. And indeed, we went and found the tombstone. You can see the little blue thing there. It became a tombstone for him. And then when we don't know how much of it is in the ground. Actually, we can see this much of it above the ground. And then there is a mother, the old lady there. And when she died, she was buried in a different cemetery. But then, indeed, you see the little blue back there. It became her tombstone as well. So that here they are when we put them together. And so these poor mosaics have turned into everything and anything. But then again, Jan actually figured out exactly which part of the stone was from, and you can see it there. There you go. And then this didn't end. Then they point another old lady to us. So we went to her house. And it was so difficult to find these places, really, because they are really like in the middle of nowhere, and you just went round and round. And we found this really like a deserted place with a big really a wild garden, and we saw one stone there, and we said, "Oh, this is it. It's true. It was the correct place." So we went and talked to this lady. Hi, we're here. We're working on this thing, and she listened to us. And you see that stepping stone there. Do you think we can take a photograph of this, or if it is possible, we can buy it off you or something? He said, "No, get away from there. Get away from there." And we're like, "Uh-oh, what have we done? We have no idea." And here's a stepping stone in the garden. And she didn't let us touch it, or even she didn't want us to photograph it at first. And here's the stone. This is a part of the mosaic that we know. And Johann kept telling her, this is the stone, but the lady said, no, 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 it's not. And we said, why is she being so, careful about this? So it's just in the garden. She's stepping on it every day. And the daughter next to her told us the story. She said when the mother was pregnant for her fourth child, they were very poor, the father had just died, and she was basically going to lose her house next day because there's so much debt in the bank. And next day their house was going to be auctioned. And she was praying all night long. And as she was praying, she fell asleep. And in her sleep, a man appeared in her dreams. And it was Hala Sultan's uncle who said, if you go to your garden under the palm tree and dig and you make a tomb for me there because I'm dead there, your troubles will end. And she woke up early in the morning, went in and kind of put a few stones there, dug it a little bit, and she found this stone during that time. So for her, this was a holy stone because the next day her house was saved. So ever since then, she believed in the story that her own dream that this was actually a holy stone. So Johann was dying to tell her, no, look at this is the thing, It's the hair of the woman there. She wouldn't hear of it. So this is really fun part of and this is all the way that the all the other parts that we know of are there. Um, I think that this was like a really, all these fragments started their own lives now. And so the stories, instead of one story, now we have many stories that will come on. So this is for as far as we're concerned, this is a true monument to fragmentation, and the stories will go on. Thank you.
Wonderful story. Questions? Any questions?
I have one question.
Both of you?
1958. So actually, I don't think that this Turkish pavilion in Brussels was so important for was because that was the 50th anniversary of the creation of the Turkish Republic, yes?
Sorry, I missed the point.
So in 1958, yes? I mean, this is 2023, we have the 100th anniversary of the creation of the Turkish Republic.
Yeah, I think it's about 37 or 38 years old at the time.
No, I'm talking about 58. That was the 50th.
No, it wasn't. It was 37. 37, I think.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah.
Okay.
But they did, in the pavilion, they had different commemorations. Like you had a big aperture. They had a company in Brussels that made a sort of big medallion. It said Expo 58 on one side, and then Peace at Home, Peace in the World, Atatürk on the other side. So they had different bits and pieces there, but it wasn't particularly a celebration of secularism.
Okay.
Okay, at that time, no.
Any other questions? Right.
Everything is clear.
I moved so much that I missed like final point. Is there anywhere we can go and see it painting? At least a piece on the wall, because you mentioned some military places.
The waiting room of the Turkish embassy is one.
Was one.
There is in Ortaköy anymore. In the military camp, but you would have to get permission from them to go and see it.
You can't though, because during the exhibition, we asked them actually, is it possible for us to at least have some, limited time with so that our visitors can come and visit that area too. And they really didn't want to do that. So I don't know how possible it is now. At that time, it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's the second place. The panels in the artist's home are still there
in Calamus, yeah.
And so those
We
are.
have the table. And we have the table.
Well, the Turkish embassy has them in their basement.
Yeah.
These pieces, and I guess the two cemeteries. You could visit if you wanted to.
That's the most public one.
Yes.
Costa.
There is the same artist mosaic in Istanbul. In public view. It is not the fragment of this.
No, there is a place in Istanbul. It's actually a shopping center on the road. It's called the Manufacturers Market. Manufacturerler Çarşısı. Okay, and this whole map of Istanbul thing is actually there. But when you look at it, it's not as detailed or as sort of well made as the one in Brussels. And I asked the family about it, and they said actually that one was made from leftover sketches for the Brussels pavilion, but it's not actually part of it. It was that, so they only had the sketches and they kind of made it from there.
This whole work of Bedri Rahmi includes a lot of his motifs that he has done in other places as parts. So actually this was very important because of that as well, because it included almost every motif that he has ever done before. He's actually very much in the popular culture today, and a lot of people after this as well, after this book that came out, they started looking at his work because he has done it in walls in all over the place, in public places, and a lot of them have been destroyed because they don't care. It's like just, and even recently, a news came out. Actually, the newspaper did a article on it in Turkey just 2 days ago. It's all by coincidence. It's just we were giving this talk today here, and then they were doing it 2 days ago. And the same journalist wrote to me and said, since I wrote this, I've been getting a lot of news where Bedri Rahmi's things are being destroyed. So he said, I'm going to go and start, kind of using this in the newspapers and so on to actually save them.
Right. But he's also, by the way, not only is he a painter or an artist, but he's actually written books and books of poetry. So when I gave sort of other versions of this talk in Turkey, afterwards we would go out to dinner and everybody had memorized a poem by him that they would read out or recite for you somewhere. So he's just a very well-known figure in the culture.
He's the leading artist. Yeah.
So did I hear correctly that the bit that you had on exhibition is now in the basement of the embassy?
Yes, so at the end, we were concerned that these pieces would be lost. And there's also a problem of ownership, because in the family, of course, would like to have them all back. But the whole pavilion and the wall was bought by the Turkish government. Okay, so it's actually government property. But then when it came back from Brussels, it was sold to the Istanbul municipality. So they have a claim on it. The military has a claim on it because they were the government at one point after the coup. Right? So there's no way of resolving all these conflicting claims at all. So at the end, the pieces that were left, we asked the Turkish ambassador, can we take them back? So they actually brought a truck, and I went with them, and we loaded piece by piece, and we put it in the basement of the Turkish embassy. And the ambassador had them all registered as immovable property. So hopefully they're still there. If somebody didn't just go in there and throw them out. But yeah.
Can I ask everybody to join us in the foyer for a drink, a glass of wine, and have a chat with the speakers there? Lead the way.
Thank you very much.